Well, let's pull in Christina Schweikert. She is a commodities expert with BHF Bank. Ms. Schweikert, what do you say? How bad is the market right now for commodities?
Well, I think it's relatively bad, and I think it's going to stay bad for quite a while, because we believe that we're not going to see a V-shaped recovery or a U-shaped recovery, but rather a long sort of bathtub-type shaped recovery.
A bathtub recovery,
yeah,
so
yeah,
more
well,
like, more like an L.
on the bottom. Yeah.
Okay.
So stagnation rather than any sort of buoyant growth.
Okay, so stagnation in the bathtub here.
Yeah.
Let's take a look at the numbers right now to talk about just how bad it is right now. You can see that last summer, a ton of copper sold for $8,000. In December, it had fallen to $2,700. That's really the low point when we're talking about the past 12 months. Now we're seeing copper for around $4,000. This looks like it could be a recovery, is it?
It's quite an astonishing rebound, really, isn't it? And it's not matched by the fundamental picture of demand and supply in the copper market. I think it's mainly a response to a very high demand from China. China has been importing copper to a very large extent, restocking, which is more or less normal, but also building up strategic reserves, very probably, using relatively low prices to stock up for the future.
Yeah, but you're talking about them building up these reserves. I'm wondering, how artificial then is this demand? Because there's demand when you're using copper, and then there's also demand when you want to build up the reserves. It can kind of give the market a false impression, can it?
Well, I think this is a kind of false spring that we are seeing, because the actual demand, there is some actual demand, because the stimulus programs are being invested in infrastructure where you need copper and building. But that's a relatively small part of it. It's mainly just stocking up for the future, and after a while, then you've stocked up enough, and then you stop doing it.
I mean, what you're saying here is incredible. You're saying that China's demand for reserves is actually greater than what all of the other countries have done in their stimulus packages. I mean, that's a lot. That's saying a lot.
Well, the stocking up the copper reserves is not necessarily connected so much to the stimulus program. It's more a question of diversifying reserves, because China has a lot of reserves in dollars, and there have been considerations of what do we do? Do we want to have all this money in US dollars, or do we want to maybe spread out a little? And commodities is one area where they've been thinking for a while, why not stock up, and copper is relatively easy to store, easier than oil, for instance, stock up on the commodities we will need.
But I think there were probably a lot of people who watched the commodities market who were thinking that we were going to see greater demand because these stimulus packages were going to generate that greater demand. But have they been disappointed?
Well, you must consider that, on the other hand, private demand has gone down. I mean, copper is used in electronics, in transport, in residential building, etc. So private demand has gone down to a really large extent. You've got a bit of an uptick from the stimulus programs. And plus, you've got supply, on the other hand, which has not come back quite as much as it maybe should have. So you're seeing a picture where you've got very soft demand and relatively high supply. Yeah. That's not too good for prices.
Let me ask you briefly, you know, stock markets are rebounding slightly, and we say that the stock market is usually ahead of the economy. Where do commodities fit into this when we're talking about a rebound?
Well, I think they are also leading indicators, but you must take account of those special factors. So I think that is connected to the uptick in optimism, which you see everywhere, and a bit better indicators are not quite as disappointing as they used to be.
Yeah, let's hope the optimism continues. Ms. Schweikert, thank you very much for talking with us.